Hello, my name is Vivian Castellanos, and for my presentation today, I am presenting Karl Marx and the conflict of theory. Karl Marx was born on May 5th, 1818, and he passed away March 14th, 1883. Marx was born in Prussia. He was the oldest surviving boy in a family of 9 children. Both of his parents were Jewish. I'd say that Marx struggled growing up. He found himself in a lot of trouble, which led him to get expelled from schools. His writing would get in the way with that too, and it would be prohibited at places. After a year at the University of Bonn, Marx was imprisoned for drunkenness and had fought with another student. His parents had enrolled him at the University of Berlin. In 1835, Marx had begun his studies of law and philosophy there, which he had then later joined movements that inspired him to become a journalist. This movement was known as Young Hegelians, who strongly criticized the political and cultural establishments of the day. After had became a journalist. He had his own paper. After receiving his degree, he had begun writing for liberal democratic newspaper and became a paper editor. But the Prussian government was not a fan of this, and after a year, they actually banned his paper. Marx had then published the Communist Manifesto, which introduced him and another theorist, their version, the concept of socialism and the conflicts in capital system. The German thinker was Friedrich Engels. Later on, they had moved to London, where he had lived for the rest of his life. And in 1867, he had published his first volume of Capital, which was his vision of capitalism and its tendencies towards self-destruction, and grew the international workers' movement based off his theories. His theories were to support the lower class, the struggling class, because of the upper class would hold on to their products and try to make the lower class basically struggle. It was harder for the lower class to gain access to these materials or these tools, along with education, the right necessities. It was definitely not equal. Marx had exploited cheap labor. The struggling class would just work for anything because obviously they need money. So they were not being treated fairly, and instead he fought for equal rights for the lower struggling class. Karl Marx is credited to develop a comprehensive theory of his history and society that centers on class struggle and economic forces. I think that his theory has definitely been brought into today's society. It's not as divided. I think he has been successful in that area of his theory. It is used in so many different ways, in race, in communities, education. It's everywhere and should be maintained by the government instead of trying to create a worse situation for the lower class. They should be comforting them and trying to support them, which is why I'd like to go back to his first volume that he published was Capital. His work in this was to express his desire to reveal the economic law of motion of modern society. He laid out his theory of capitalism to contain its own self-destruction and triumph of communism. Unfortunately, he had passed away before he was able to finish all of his volumes, so they have remained unfinished. Conflict of theory. Conflict theory is characterized by various inequalities and conflicts that arise due to differences in power, resources, and social statuses. I see that conflict theory is still, like I said, in today's society. I think that the government has made it a focus on power and money because it is a different treatment when you have money versus when you don't. I think people get treated way differently when someone knows that they have money. They are more attentive and they would feel the need to fulfill their other people's needs versus people who are struggling. Other people don't seem to want to help them. It seems like a burden. An example would probably be with cars, sometimes clothes. I feel like people view other individuals who have either materialistic things on or the type of car they drive as their social status, I'd say. If they have a more expensive car or clothes, they are viewed as more expensive versus somebody who would wear regular clothes or what we would think as normal wouldn't be viewed as that. They would seem like they don't have money. Concept theories assume that all societies have structural power divisions and resource inequalities that lead to group having conflict interests. I think that this can lead to conflicts. I feel like many people can become jealous or can not be happy for their either friend or somebody else that they're around because they become envious due to not having the same thing or the same amount of money. And I think it can create a lot of conflict. Money, I feel like, has a lot of power with people and can take over their lives, creating a lot of problems, which honestly happens a lot, and that's what creates a downfall in their lives. Marx's version of conflict theory focuses on two classes. These classes are known as the ruling capitalist, bourgeoisie, which owns the means of production, and the working class, proletariat, whose alienated labor the ruling class exploit to produce profit. How I see it is a pyramid. Is the ruling class is at the top. I feel like they feel they have more power versus the lower class is at the bottom. They are struggling. His social theory is about society in a state of perpetual conflict because of competition for limited resources. This goes back to the government and domination and power. They are just trying to dominate the lower class into not being able to access any of the supplies or the necessities that they need. Instead, they are suppressing the poor and making them powerless. This is a conflict of theory that individuals and group within society would have to try to work maximize their own wealth and power. Conflict theory focuses on competition among groups within society over limited resources, which Marxists saw society as a divided of economic class between the proletarian working class and the bourgeois ruling class. Conflict theory focuses on the economic institution as tools for the struggling class to help maintain equality and avoid dominance from the upper class. Marx focuses on each class consists of groups of people by mutual interest and certain degree of property ownership. In terms of products and services, our distributed society was described as pyramid, and the top of it were the elites versus the bottom were the poor. As I mentioned, it is not easy for the lower class to gain the same education and the resources that they need, so it's unfair for them to get these jobs that aren't supporting them the way they need to and their families, versus the elite upper class have these degrees and the support and education that they do receive from the government due to the amount of money they have is unfair. What I took from this is Marx's theory has contributed a lot into society now. I think that his theory has overcame many obstacles for the lower class. There has been support, such as different areas for low-income housing. There is support such as food supplies and being able to gain access for families who don't have the money or funds for it. Also, at times it wouldn't also just be about money. It would be about discrimination, your race. Many psychologists have been turned away from certain colleges because of their race or their sex. Certain colleges only take males or non-African Americans, which was very unfair. There was a lot of obstacles that had to be overcome to get to a point where somebody wanted to be successful from the lower class, that the government, I feel like, tried making it impossible for them. I think that Marx's theories have overcame many of those obstacles, which is why so many people can have the access that they can now for school, products, resources, and so much more. This is the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much.